a name.
It's a great name.
OTHERIX, Buffalo, New York.
If you don't want to go through the 77 minutes of the video, take these 3 sentences as their summation. Number 1. Common sense was all that most any of us had to answer the questions of life, aside from brute authorities trying to answer them for us. Number 2. If nothing comes from nothing, then something always was. Number 3. It is finding out what it was, a thing that always was, that is the satisfaction of any of us with common sense enough to follow through with what a thing that always was had to be. Science came from logic, and logic came from common sense. And what science cannot answer, logic can. But without university education or experts at hand, the common man has and must rely on the simple logic of common sense to answer the questions of life, including the great questions. Why? Why do I exist? Why does anything exist? Why existing at all? Why? Someone online gave the insight: when you were in school and your teacher asked you all in the class a question, you were never allowed to answer, "That's a stupid question." Science has told us repeatedly in every way, why is a stupid question. Stupid question. Climb aboard for the road trip to the big answer to why. The crowds of so-called scientists say their little bit of knowing how is enough to dismiss asking why. But the very core of every person and the universe itself, demanding attention and answer, is why. Listen up. So many things we take for granted, having never thought them through at all. To get by and stay with the crowd and not suffer by being an outcast too awfully much, we take in a whole body of fact as fact. But when that body of fact is not contained within it, a rock-hard answer to why that knocks it against the wall and meets it right where it lives, with information that justifies why it was such a huge question to begin with, it's time to either crouch back down in that chair of yours and tell yourself for the million-billionth time to shut up and be satisfied with the cheap and unsatisfactory answer that we all have, or to send yourself on that wild quest for the big answer. Let's start from scratch. Let's start with nothing. Can something come from nothing? And I appeal only to the common sense of common men for an answer, not some convoluted, perverted, alienated logic of some professorial thinking machines housed in universities. Most of us mentally competent men and women, disabused of indoctrinational nonsense, would readily say, on the basis of common sense alone, after giving the question a cursory glance and a few moments' thought, no, something cannot come from nothing. Matter of fact, and even more succinctly, we'd say, nothing comes from nothing. I'm speaking from common sense. I'm putting myself in the shoes of every man. of every human who ever saw the light of day. I'm saying if each of us has wondered why, as we looked above to the starry heavens at night, why, as we contemplated the difficulties visiting an otherwise wonderful life, if each of us has why, then each of us has been given the tools to answer it. Each of us, to not have to accept the answers someone else has hammer and influence to press upon us. I say common sense alone can get us there. What? No mystic revelations? No voice guiding us into the darkness of the great unknown and mesmerizing our minds with secrets, ancient secrets, commanding us to believe, only believe, and to trust the voice of the invisible beyond? Common sense, plain, tried, and true, saves us from such a fix. And anywho, we'd be testing such voices with common sense anyway, unless our lot is to be unthinking sheep. We'd better keep in mind, we are actually before the Big Bang. This is where we are at in our thinking trip, our bus on the thought experiment. If nothing comes from nothing, then something always was. Don't ask me for the proof. I'm running on common sense alone. Nothing comes from nothing. I have not much more to say except what comes easily from it. Oh, here's something. If something could come from nothing, anything could come from nothing. Anything. Anything. If logic does not apply at the beginning of things, why should it be of any use, as any authority, in any situation, anywhere, in anything later on? If the foundation of the building has no confirmation from the plumb line and level, why should the windows, the door jambs, the ceiling rafters, or any other part of that house conform? The few times they would be happenstance, luck, and at the whim of drunken craftsmen, common sense. So far it has not seen one thing come from no thing. If nothing comes from nothing, then something always was. Then something always was. Something has always been. Something has always existed. And many dismiss it and are left in an illogical limbo of no certain form. It can take the form of something coming from nothing. It can take the form of logic not necessarily being present at the start of things. It can take the form of needing to explain everything by particles and physics and arcane equations indecipherable to the common man. It can take the form of only the experts know, and the experts don't know. Indeed, it takes the form of experts loudly and proudly pronouncing, quote, "We don't know." It takes the form of being told by the experts that all they are is a well-ordered stack of chemicals. Therefore, existing is no big deal. It takes the form of why, having no answer. So don't even ask. It's some aberration, some unworkable mutation, mutant strain of thinking that got into the thinking things, us. And that the realities of time and chance and struggle for survival held no place except in the quote-unquote hearts of aberrant individuals and religions that prey on such sickness, indeed on such misaligned creatures. But who is actually surviving without knowing why? I know why. I started with something that has always been. How did I get there? How did I get to such seemingly transcendent territory? Such a fertile factoid. One step. Nothing comes from nothing. Many dismiss it, and as we have seen, are left in their muddle and malaise, with no certain answers, indeed no way of getting certain answers to the larger questions of life, personhood, existence, and why. So they must dismiss them. Therefore, they are empty-headed as well as illogical. So they must wear the reputations and confirmations of wise men and heads full of knowledge, and the arbiters and protectors and referees of logic itself. Something has always been. It did not come from nothing. Nothing comes from nothing. It did not come from something else. It was first. All common sense. Solid common sense. We're not playing the game of only the experts know. Only the experts can go there. Because many a man in centuries past, and perhaps even now, had no experts available. He was left on his own, trusting no one with this treasure in his hand. This treasure to answer why. He'd seen others, his fellow men, denigrate and dismiss it, so to him they were lesser souls, lesser men. Why? Truly answered is knowing a secret that no one else knows, but that lays in plain sight, so that no one can harass you for keeping such a wonderful thing to yourself. And what? Guess what? Most everyone around you, and most likely you yourself, have answered that why with a half answer. With why truly answered, you'll have a tiger in your tank, rather than just some half-answered picture of a pussycat in your wallet to pick out and show timidly whenever you're asked for your credentials of your personhood. There is a self-existent thing, a thing that always was, that did not come from something else, and that did not come from nothing. There is a self-existent thing. Since my premise is that every major question of existence can be answered by any common man using common sense, why am I speaking? Why, if any common, warm-blooded, red-blooded human can answer the major questions using common sense, why me? Why am I here talking to you with prepared remarks on this certain topic? I'm here to speak up for common sense. Common sense has its enemies. And sometimes on some topics, among some groups of people, its enemies hold sway, bear influence, rule and exercise dominion, and occupy the place of authority. Standing my ground, I enlist the observations of men. Every man is an island. And the sense that is common is the sea between us. I speak up for common sense and deliver it with a satisfied soul, a satisfied mind, a satisfied heart. Who of all mankind, of friend and stranger, other than me, has these three? Go, listen to them. I speak for common sense because every man does not. Don't get me wrong, there are some that do, but every man? No. There are many in whom stupidity reigns. We, of common sense, share in the atmosphere of a wonderful club. And since the thing that always was, common sense lays open the possibility that it will never be equaled, let alone surpassed, not to speak of being stopped. Therefore, we must be aware that that thing that always was may still yet be. If so, who may find it? Let's not lay aside common sense just yet. Our surest way of getting there, discerning, and yes, finding it, is in the continuation of our journey by staying on the bus, driven by our driver, safe, reliable, and courteous common sense. Yes, what are we looking for? What will be its shape, its character, its characteristics, and of most importance now, as our next question, in the midst of all of these, how many were there? Or shall I say, are there? Let's go to the videotape. What other questions are there? How many first things are there? For one thing, how many? You mean, is there some rule somehow, some way that there can't be more than one first thing? Yes, there is a rule. We'll get to it after the evidence slaps us around. Man, I thought we were getting to the first thing. One first thing. And now you're saying, just saying, is it reasonable that there was just one first thing? To plant our feet on that. Now we get into the evidence. Remember I told you that there's evidence of the first thing? Yeah, I remember that. Where would the evidence be? Here's one piece of evidence. Yeah, well. Huh? What do you mean? Huh? One finger. Yeah, it's one finger. Yeah. There's another one. There's another piece of evidence. What? A bird out there? Yeah, one bird. There's another one. But all those trees out there, there's a cluster of trees, one cluster of trees. There's one tree there also in the middle of them. What's so special about that one? Nothing. I'm trying to get my mind just a little bit around what you're saying, but, well, stay with me just for one more moment or two. Okay? All right, I'm not going anywhere. Tree, bird, finger. One sun in the sky. One of millions and millions and millions of suns. All in our one galaxy. And millions of galaxies all in our one universe. One raindrop of the many raindrops on one window pane. One word from my mouth at any one time. Putting together one sentence. Expressing one thought. Yeah. Pretty incredible. Yeah. I'd say that's pretty incredible. Well, where does all this oneness come from? I never even thought about that kind of question. Just thought that's the way things are. Oh, it's the way things are, but we're answering why do things exist. Don't you think the way things are kind of applies to that question? Just a little bit? I guess you got a point there. So where does this characteristic come from that is so widespread, so in your face all around us, everywhere, that we don't even think about it, that we're blind to it? But we use it every day. We use it in everything we say, everything we encounter. So how is it? Does it make sense that things start out with two or more first thing? No. And if they did start out with two or more, when would oneness ever be established as a characteristic? Ever. Never would. It would be just some kind of put on, rather than being the very fabric of each thing. There is a thing about one which is upon everything. Each and everything is a piece of evidence that things started with one first thing. That wave of being one is set upon each and everything from one first thing sounding it. One could never exist as you, as one person, as you being one thing, one consciousness, one awareness, one focus with 2 eyes to see it, one breathing organism with heart, soul, lungs, liver, guts, legs, arms, hair and head, hand and feet, and all the rest. One could not be right now in you unless one powerful one had been at the start. Otherwise, the full strength of one could never be established. Is there some rule somehow, some way that there can't be more than one first thing? Yep. One can stand alone, but 2 or more always need one, since 2 or more are always 2 or more ones. What is it? What is this self-existent thing? What's it like? What are its characteristics? What are its attributes, its powers, if any? It's the best thing ever, and it is one. Whole, complete, entire, sufficient unto itself. In other words, it never needed to change. Pussy whip. The first thing is whole, complete, entire, sufficient unto itself. Self-existent is one. Self-existent is the best thing ever. Where could better come from? There is only one thing until a second thing comes along. Self-existent needs no other thing. One thing, complete and entire unto itself, that has withstood eternity, being one thing and being one. Cannot get better. It only has one thing from which to get things. Itself. It has no other thing with which to get, by which when added to it, makes it better, or worse for that matter, and or becomes better or worse. It is. It has always just been. And as a common man, I hear always, and use the concept of time to get a handle and a hold on it, an understanding of it in my mind. Best as I can have an understanding of such a wonderful and, to me, very transcendent thing. So, time. Let's start with this much ballyhooed and spoken about age of the universe. The scientists are saying about 13.8 billion years. Multiply that by, 13.8 billion. That's 190 billion years. And what's 190 billion years compared to always? Next to nothing. That's what. Not even a tenth, not even a hundredth, not a millionth, not even a billionth. Next to nothing. And how is it that modern science, delivering such marvels throughout our enlightened lifetimes, can do without such a concept, such a thing? Marvels. And yet nothing is marvelous as a thing that's always been. Why, they have to keep up with even more marvelous things, even making thinking things, and making thinking things that can make things and create things, and can improve themselves and make their own selves better. We've passed the point where a human, a person, can't tell the difference between another person and one of these thinking machines. Marvelous. Marvelous. The latest and the greatest leave the ancient far behind. Assign what's gone before as outdated, useless. The inhabitants of times where everything seemed a big mystery. We know stuff now. And all the stuff we know, we just got to stuff it into these always getting better thinking machines and finally be able to ask it why and not have it blow up in our face. Right?
Now, ask the general.
A question that can't be answered.
Impossible.
Allow me to ask it.
Go ahead.
was the question? What was it?
W-H-Y. Question mark.
Why?
Why?
Why? Yep. The answer's just around the bend. Too bad. Too bad for all those lumpkins that went before us. Too bad they lived in such times where ghosts, devils, and angels were under every rock. And the hierarchy told you what was what. The fog is lifted, and science has led the way. At least what part of science could get funded that hadn't been defunded, debunked, dismissed, and blacklisted. Big pharma, big food, big science. It has dismissed personhood to the extent and so much that persons are forming their own god by silicon and code nowadays, just as in past times we did it by silver and gold. Common sense can answer quite swiftly. It can use many illustrations to get across its point. Here's a rather picturesque one. It involves asking some guy at work, "How busy are you?" And his response, perhaps you've heard it: "Busier than a one-legged man in a ass-kicking contest." The first thing is one thing. It has no other part with which it may effect a change within itself, so as to go from one lesser place or condition or character to another better one. It's stuck. Just like you are stuck, being one thing. Why, I have legs and bones and all kinds of parts, you say. But, I say, what about you? The you were in kindergarten is the same you sitting in that chair right now. No change. Nothing better. The heck, you say. You say, I'm a whole lot better today than way back then. But again, I say, and it's all common sense. Consider the difference between you way back then, in kindergarten, and some friend you had back then in kindergarten. Are you as different now from the you were in kindergarten than the difference between the you back in kindergarten and your friend back there in kindergarten? Well, of course not. Start making sense here, buddy. Of course I'm the same person. Of course I'm the same person in that respect. Friends, that's all the respect I need. In that respect, you are the same person, and you will never change. The answer pathway has been designed for the common man, using the most common sense of all, the most available know-how out there. There is no search for the rare, elusive elixir back out in some nondescript and secret location, accessible only after almost insurmountable feats of strength, proofs of bravery, and horrible, humiliating rites of passage and initiation. Nope. All of that crap is cover for the fact that there's nothing there. There is some thinking involved, but not of the class where we must wait for the spiritual Einsteins, prophets of perplexity, to tally the total and benefit us regular guys with their beneficious benevolence. Average Joe has always had it in his hand to derive why. That is its answer. And my talk here is to revive for all of us average Joes that kick ass, whoop ass, get the bullshit out of the way, and off the road. Since nothing comes from nothing, and since only one thing has always been, that one first thing had no way of getting better. It could not get better on its own. All it was one thing. It could not grow some second thing within it, which added to it would make it, the first thing, better. And also, the result would be that it was two or more things. And it, the first thing, can't make anything better than itself, if it can make anything at all. It's stuck, and we are stuck, with it being the best thing ever. Now you just sit back and see if you can rest easy on that. Or if something inside you, conditioned or trained by the scientists' evolutionary theory, as we all are, by one or another means, rises up and says, things get better. Yeah, you just go ahead and by common sense, which has gotten us this far, now speaks otherwise. I say that common sense says that the one first thing is, was, and always will be the best thing ever. If you think otherwise and think I'm all wrong, you will have to instead put lights, camera, focus, and attention on such statements as evolution has proven that things get better over time by chance. Blah, blah, blah. But there is not one set of fossils that prove it. Not one. It's all fossils of the gaps. It's so against common sense and contrary to all we know that it must be repeated, often repeated, to hammer it like religious prayer into our heads. The story. And all the big guys and gals with all the college degrees, brainiacs with papers to prove it, telling us this story, say it happened. So, it happened. But the lowly man in common sense knows it's bullshit and steers clear of that concert and its music. Not one set of fossils, not even one, where it's one species at one end and another species at the other, exist. It's all supposition, blanks filled in with hooey, however many big words they use to get you and keep you hoodwinked. Common sense takes you gently by the hand and keeps you from that dreaming. The self-existent thing is the best thing compared with every other thing, due to one capacity in the most basic category and league, which all things that are members of, existence. In this most basic category of all, that things exist, there is one of those things that has always existed. I'm not weaving anything in here, my friends. These kind of pronouncements and statements and sayings and points are the gist of our talk, our trip, our journey to why. Intelligence, power, wealth, creativity, ingenuity, empathy, affection, strength, perseverance, beauty, eloquence, thinking on the fly, thinking on your feet, improvisational, or whatever else come out of it, skill, talent, attribute, or resource, is at best a secondary consideration to the best category and consideration of all, being. Talk about something we take for granted. Bare being takes the cake. In the category of bare being, the most important of all, for if they don't exist, they're at best a wish to all comers and clowns far and wide, schemers and dreamers, potentates and potato mates, judges and queens, movers and shakers, givers and takers, heroes and fakers, from dung heaps to blazing stars and undiscovered things as well. One of us has always been. None of you can match that. In that one respect and one respect alone, to exist, to be, the most necessary and basic of all respects, out of all things that are, were, or who may or will be, one of those things, always was. And on that alone, each and every other thing that exists, past, present, future, actual, supposed, material, immaterial, whether having a voice or supplied with a voice by those who do, had better say, as a thing that is, to the thing that always was, well, that's better than me. That's better than what I am. And so they all stacked together, all having to admit, each as a thing that is, that the thing that always was is better at doing the most basic of tasks, being, existing, since each thing must rightly admit it when brought into the scales, even everything together on one side of the scales, and that one thing alone on the other. What do you think? thoughts? That one thing, that one self-existent thing, that one thing that has always been, nails inside of the scales, hard against the tabletop, and sends everything on their side of the scales flying off into the air, off into nothing, as nothing, in comparison to it, announcing as they fly, yes, you're the best. Even a rock that has always been is better than 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000,000 Marilyn Monroes and Taylor Swifts, Trumps, Rothschilds and Rockefellers, Washingtons and Wesleys, and is worth their contemplation, veneration, worship, reverence, thought, dedication, and discovery, each doing their best and only to get to it, no matter the cost of the bus trip there, or even if they had to go it alone. Even if it always was. Why the heck did I write it that way? All of their intelligence and beauty, magnetism and money would be a pittance compared with anything that has always been. Yet even a rock that's always been is better than 10,000 geniuses and glorious babes together, times infinity into the future. For that rock has infinity into the infinite past, covered all by itself. And you're going to have to make up stories and dreams to excuse yourself from that. It was. It is. Whatever came up to stop it, that can stop it. It will always be. An incomparable record at existing was all it took to take the prize at being the best. Who'd have thought? What does the first thing need to be for there to be any second thing at all? It's one, it's total, it's all there is. I'm speaking of till the second thing comes along. How and why does a second thing happen? Are we going to start looking at chance and accident and luck all over again? Can we allow common sense to beat those to a bloody pulp once again, and to therefore dismiss them out of the running as far as being able to pull off such a thing? Do they even rate a paragraph? Let's go to the videotape. Take a penny, heads up, in the palm of your hand. Now quickly turn that palm downward and slam that penny on your table. Lift your hand. What's that penny show? Tails, of course. Pick it up, heads up. Flip it in the air like a referee at a football game. Call it. What is it? You don't know until it lands and you look. And what part did chance play in making it heads or tails? None. Chance does not exist, just like two does not exist. Two and red and young and 2 stars, 2 eyes, 2 bologna sandwiches, they exist. A red wagon, a red barn, they exist. A young person, a young doggy, they exist. But to itself, red itself, young itself, just tools of communication, my friend. Words to tell someone else how many, what color, what age. Words. Not that words do not exist, but it is a different kind of existence. So too with chance. Just a word to tell everyone how many possible outcomes exist in a situation. But 2 does not give a coin 2 sides, and chance does not decide which side comes up. Chance is nothing more, ever, anywhere. It is not a force or power. Chance is always 2 numbers, only 2 numbers. The number of possibilities that will happen over the number of possibilities that can happen. a ratio. And the first number is always 1. Numbers are powerless. And the sum of all the tiny forces in any given experiment or other consideration or environment
throughout the entire universe
is not chance. Scientists and their ilk misuse that label to go along with their laziness and their religion. Tiny forces are forces, not chance. Chance is just a word, a combination of 2 words. Numbers are just words. Chance is just 2 numbers. Time is nothing either. In the power realm of being, no power at all. How is time a fiction? 3 seconds, 1 nail, halfway in 1 piece of wood, 2 tools, a feather and a hammer, 3 seconds each. Whap, 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 with the feather on the nail. No effect, no change. Bang, bang, bang with the hammer. Same nail, effect, change. It's in way farther. So, each tool had 3 seconds. What did time do? Nothing. What did the feather do? Nothing. What did the hammer do? Nothing. The hammer is in my hand. Right. Well then, we'll leave the fool to wait on luck and its cousins, being able to do anything with nothing, while we regular guys follow common sense into more practically minded solutions, born from hard-earned experiences. A motive force is at work here, a thing that can indeed pull another thing out of nothing, and it only has itself to start with. One thing has always been, just one. We've said it 40 times, but perhaps you've never or haven't heard enough times that one means it has no parts. One also, therefore, means it has no substance that can be divided into piles or pieces, as cookie dough or dirt. No bowl of one thing that can be subdivided into 2, 4, 17, 100. Whatever number of things, it is one thing. It stays one thing. One thing has always been. And we are not a part of it. Yeah. Yeah. Many not only look to the ends of the earth for answers, but to the ends of the universe. So if there's billions of planets out there, there's a few of them that have a way head start on us. And guess what? They haven't found a way of getting anything to us. Some say it's all a simulation, and they sport their huge crania on their huge heads as they sputter such drivel. If we are all some computer simulation by an advanced race of beings that evolved before us, then where did they come from? I'm not talking planet-wise either. I'm talking into existence. You've just pushed back the question. If we are M, and M came from L, then where did L come from? You haven't answered anything with we're all a simulation by some master race of beings. Here's another one, the multiverse. And the same analysis as well. If we are just one of a number, some brainiacs say an infinite number, where did all of that come from? One more case. If there can be a thing without a cause, it may as easily be the whole universe as it might be God. Yeah, that one is from some Nobel laureate, philosopher, mathematician, and yes, logician. Yep, here's Mr. Logic saying it's just as easy for many things to be self-existent as it is for just one. Oh wait, I got that slightly wrong. He didn't say many things. He said everything. Everything can just as easily be self-existent as one thing. I am not here to 100%, 1000% prove my statements. I am just saying these statements make sense. They make more sense than the opposing statements.
The question, who made me, cannot be answered, since it immediately suggests the further question, who made God? If everything must have a cause, then God must have a cause. If there can be anything without a cause, it may just as well be the world as God.
In other words, to dismiss the one thing that always was, just say everything always was. But common sense says 1 is easier than 2, 1 is way easier than many, and 1 is infinitely easier than everything. That, my friend, is why I have, from the start of our bus trip, commended common sense, the plain logic of common men, to you rather than logic per se. Brainiacs, professors, and all who want to follow them as wannabe logical men, but who nevertheless spurn any of it whispering of the existence of God, use quote-unquote logic to wrap themselves and so cover and hide their nonsense. Now, I've been trying to find a way of going along a path that, instead of this, actually takes one person along with me, and she feels common sense at her right, at her left, behind her, pushing her along, of having her see the ineptitude, the total lack of ability, power to get anything. Chance can't do it. Nothing can't do it. The sole arbiter, the only worker on the scene, is one thing. And still, I'm going off my prepared remarks and allowing one last-ditch effort, at least one, to allow for the fact that at least common sense that runs successful living will give us an out. The start of things was a thing that always was. That's the mighty nail common sense has hammered in our hearts. That common sense will give us another idea that will keep us from having to face another nail. And this nail says that first thing has to be a person. We don't want that nail. On the other hand, we will not be divorcing ourselves from common sense. And we know that chance can't do a thing. I suppose that's the big tiger on the whole trip, that the story of chance that has been so announced by loudspeaker year after year after year by the science crowd have filled our heads with how mighty chance can be. And I tell you, babe, again and again, we see, take a look again at what a fallacy, at what a false story, at what a fable that is. There's a place where two persons exist, you and me. To itself, it's a word. It's a device of communication between persons. Same thing with chance. That's all chance is. Chance is not an initiating force. There is one first thing that always was. There was only one. All right. So we started this little pathway, our little walk together here with one nail, realizing we have one nail about the one first thing, and then we gotten hold of a second one again. Kind of repeating a few things that we've picked up along our 60 pages of talking. So we got two nails. Where do we go from here, my friend? Where to from here? What does that first thing need to be? What does it have to be? Bare requirements. The bare essentials. Even if it's just one, a bare essential. For there to be any kind of second thing. One doesn't have parts, but one is whole and complete. Doesn't need a second thing. With these 3 nails in hand, we feel a 4th one with some open eyes, weighing all we see, all we have seen, all we've felt, all we've discovered in a long and or a short life, the best sense about us, the clearest senses, understanding, after having gathered experiences. The pages of common sense written in our guts. Pages of common sense that we refer to. We begin to see, feel, to know that 4th nail. Can you feel it? Can you feel it, babe? 1, 2, 3. Before the 4th. 1, 2, 3. 3 nails so far. One first thing there's always been. Chance is just a number. That one first thing is 1. That one first thing doesn't need a second thing. It has always been without need of a second thing. It is whole, it's complete, it is 1. So, there's a 4th area created by the question, which arises from a question we've had, been playing in our head, in our mind, and in our mouth, from our mouth, for quite a while. What does that first thing have to be? Why does a second thing happen? How does a second thing happen? What is the first thing that it can explain those questions, that can answer those questions, that can fit those questions with an answer that nails them? Maybe you want to pause the video and sit here a while. You see, coming to an answer on this thing. Are we prejudiced? Are we crippled by our own condition? By the key fact of our own condition, that we are persons? Does that cloud this question? Us answering this question, getting to an answer of this question. Does that pervert our senses? Some fault in the tire on our bus that the steering wheel has to go that way, in spite of the fact that the road is this way. Is it driving us off the true answer and getting us to a false answer? Is our own personhood the problem in getting to an answer? Well, my friends, and the whole universe besides, whatever is, only persons ask why. That's the biggest question ever. And we, as arrogant as it may sound, have not found any other things existing that are better than persons. Common sense, driving this bus all along, admits to 3 things that can cause things to happen. 1, need. We have dismissed that possibility. 2, forces outside of our control or outside of our care to measure or even consider. There might be a majority of us that call such things chance, but with one thing there, only one, there are no forces outside of its control. It is the only force there. The only other way, the third way, that common sense sees that things generally happen is by wishing them to happen. Something outside of even needing something wishes something to happen. And it has the power to make it happen. What kind of things do we see, do we know, has such power that we know of, that are such a vast majority of the things that every other possibility is inconsiderable, minute? I suppose you could say a doggy wishes for affection, and it can make that happen by wagging its tail and giving you its pet me eyes. But the power to make something by wishing it alone, wishing, and the power to make those wishes come true, are wholly the purview of persons.
The first thing is a person. All who do not accept it are left with a couple pennies to answer the dollar question of life. I've got my dollar in my hand. The first thing is a person. But those fools suck on their pennies, saying the first thing can be anything less.
Better cannot come from nothing. Something cannot come from nothing, not even the smallest something of all. If something could come from nothing, then anything could come from nothing. We don't see things coming from nothing, no matter the mesmerizing merchants of hoodwink and hooey to the contrary. Nothing comes from nothing. If nothing comes from nothing, then something always was. At least one thing. Something always was. A first thing always was. There was only one first thing, since one can stand alone. But two or more always needs one, since two or more are always two or more ones. The one first thing is one, whole, complete, entire, sufficient. It has always been. It has always been only one thing. Therefore, it needs no other thing. It is one. This thing that's always been, this self-existent thing, is one. The only self-existent thing was the best thing that will ever be. It was all alone for forever. It had no beginning, because it always was. Forever means forever, and has meaning as forever, because the first thing was there, being in it. This is simple stuff, folks. It's just plain old common sense. And I've got this old average Joe testifying to it. It's the best thing because it's one thing, and therefore has no place to put some fulcrum to lift it out of what it is. Simple stuff, my friends. So simple it eludes all the wise guys. One thing is stuck with what it is. All wishful thinking to the contrary. What do you say? What must the first thing be? Chance cannot do it. Luck or accident? Nope. And this first thing remains just one thing. Indivisible. Unchangeable. Common sense, wish as we might for some way out of it, is to our left and to our right, pressing us at our back, pushing our face to the fact and our feet to the fire, that this first thing wanted a second thing to happen. It wanted it. It wished for it. It designed a thing to fit that wish, and it made that second thing happen. It brought a thing out of nothing, nothing except its wish and power, into existence. The only things that wish like that are persons, and the only person at that level is a self-existent person. Self-existence provides benefits, power to do such a thing. You might call him God. Strangely enough, he calls himself, personal name, mind you, self-existent.
Yes, Yahweh means self-existent. Why did the first thing do it? Why? Ever heard that question before? Why? Why do I exist? Why does anything exist? Why existing at all? The major clue to all of the above is by answering why the second thing. Don't you think? And maybe there's a smart aleck or two out there with the curious question, why the first thing? Smart aleck. The first thing was first. If there was a why to it, that why, that explanation for the first thing, would have had to have existed before the first thing in order to explain it. So there is no why to the first thing, since the first thing is first. Common sense. If he doesn't need anything, why make anything? Dare I say it doesn't make sense. Why mess with perfection? One, needing nothing, complete, perfect, sufficient in all respects, not owing anyone anything, no dudes to report to keep tabs on him, to make sure they get their cut. Nope, no manager or boss at all. He's the boss. Well, with no one to boss around. Loneliness? Nope. No persons he came from to be lonely for. Without that, you've got to think we're dealing with a whole other kind of person here. The loving and empathetic among us might say, oh, he had so much love to share, but no one to share it with. I suppose there's some merit to that, if we weren't dealing with this unique person, as just discussed, impervious to loneliness, so it seems. So too with other qualities and needs we humans have, just by birth and family and country and life and needs for survival and respect and ego and showing off and boredom and mayhem and the whole mixed bag we must deal with, including and ultimately death. No such pressures on this first person. Why did the only thing that must exist, if anything else or at all exists, why did the only necessary existing thing, a self-existent thing, a thing that always was, decide to make existing more than just about himself? Why a second thing? That he did it is obvious, but to wonder why he did it is not some original thing we came up with. He put it in every thinking being. If it was of us, then why do many of us prefer to ignore it? He put it in each one of us, same way he put toes and hands, hearts and lungs. He has set eternity in their heart, without which man cannot find out the work that God makes from the beginning even to the end. I know your King James Version says otherwise, but there are places where King James theologians and translators strangled the text rather than letting it speak, shout, and sing. And this is one of them. The reason why he made a second thing was to show off. I mean, really. The first thing made a picture and made persons to view it. He started with a person to show himself to. The self-existent person made a person to fully understand him, to fully understand and appreciate what a self-existent is, to stop on that one thing and not let go, but rather to get out of that one bare fact, self-existence, that a person has it, and that second thing will never have it, nor will any other person, place, or thing, to get out of that one bare fact all that it needs to remain satisfied for forever. Does it fit? Does it hit? hit with the thunder we, on this trip, have built you up for. The portrait and image and buzz and impact of God among humanity is worth fighting for. Because there are people who tear it down. There are whole religions that tear it down. Tear it down by replacing it with unworthy substitutes. Meanwhile, the only self-existent, whose only name is self-existent, sits back and watches the show go by, the parade go by, the show and parade of all the ages he planned. He has enemies. But common sense brought us to him, not to Allah or anyone else or anything else. Ever heard someone say, I wouldn't worship a God who is going to send me to hell for not worshiping him? Let's all stand back and observe the genius of that statement. Guess what, buddy? That's the deal. If you can call things out of nothing but a wish and give them a choice, brains, being, personhood, between being with you or not, then you can change the rules. You can change the conditions of the deal. I've got a little secret for you, friend. God has allowed enough, quote-unquote, evidence that he does not exist to be available to the minds of whatever man or men who choose to grab hold of it to do so as to blind themselves to all the evidence that he does exist. Why does he allow that to go on? Because he'd rather not have to live and put up with such fools for forever. So this is his one way of winnowing the crowd.
Before it brings forth the second thing, it is the only thing in existence. It, the first thing, a self-existent thing, the only self-existent thing. And we now know by common sense that it is a person. The self-existent is a person. The first person is self-existent. As a person, he has a name. He calls himself to designate himself from any other person that will ever be, since he sees far and wide in all future circumstance. He sees the one thing, the one characteristic that will always and ever distinguish him from all other persons and places and things. He is self-existent. That is that one distinguishing characteristic. Not just that he is and will always be greater than all other persons, places, and things. Calling himself the Great One or any other such thing would never be sufficient, since greatness and all other characteristics can be spread around and be claimed by many. But self-existence? No. So he is self-existent. That is his name. Yahweh means self-existent.
God is an alpha male, and Y is his signal to the pack. There are those who could be but are not as yet members of the pack. The pack is true and knows the signal. The rest deafen themselves to that signal. Self-existent is the alpha male, and his signal is the Y deep within us. And it leads to a craving answer, to study how to answer, to meet it at its heart and strength. And many pass on that work of answering it to others, experts and friends, fathers and heroes, philosophers, teachers, gurus, leaders of whatever suitability. The many who pass on this work to others do not run with the pack. They don't get to rub shoulders or noses with the alpha male, with the leader of the pack. And the experts and such that they count on for answers, well, most of them got their answer likewise from some other man, some other expert or guru or such. So they don't run with the pack either. Phonies and fools. What can I tell you? The thrill of the hunt is in the chase. We are in the chase. We are in the hunt. We are the pack. Our animal, our tasty treat, our carcass at the end is what we've answered why with, and lived to see it tear that question of questions down by the roots. Why has its own superlative eminence. If you let it out and let it scream and say its piece wide open, if you set it free to do its thing without restriction. In a sense, it's kind of sad to see it go. for. Is that not what happens when it's fully answered? Answered fully? Well, let me tell you, friends, answering at least this particular question is like a guy looking for a girlfriend and a girl looking for a guy. They search, they try out. At last, the one is finally there, staring at the face and shape of the other. Question answered. Of course, there's usually a bit of courtship, of checking each other out. The connection deepens. Why gives way to who? Every vestige and breath and whisper and whimper of why is satisfied when I stare into the only self-existent being. When I look away even slightly, why comes back in some variety and strength. Since I can return to him, since we have a covenant, an agreement, a friendship, blood brotherhood with each other, when I do, why once again melts away, is satisfied, is satiated. God made me to look at him. God made me to look at him. Eyes to see, mind to study, heart to understand and make a oneness of relationship. I checked him out. I tested him, using me as a test case, letting that one thing he was and has always been out to be studied by others is why others came into being. He brought them, brought us into being. Self-existent being. You can never have it. You can never possess it. Only one person has it and possesses it. He got it by being it alone, by that being all that he is. But you were made to behold it, just like he beheld it through ages past, before ages ever were, and never once suffered a boring moment. It satisfies. That's why was put in you, to lead you to the only thing that God is, the one thing that makes God God. That one thing always was, that there was indeed only one of them, that it had to be a person, that it had to be the best thing and the best person that will ever be, and that these few but all-encompassing points were given to us through common sense alone, is sufficient to boast to you that my claim was true. My claim, right from the start, that common sense can answer why for the common man. Self-existent being alone satisfies. Period. Therefore, self-existent being satisfies the deepest question. Why? Self-existent being alone satisfies. Why? And self-existent being is not a commodity. In other words, only one person has it and he can't give it away. He is it. He alone is it. Only one thing always was. Only one thing, one person always was. He cannot make some other thing nor other person that always was. Again, a deep, deep statement, but one made and borne out by common sense, the plain old logic of common sense, the plain logic of common men. He alone has it. He alone is that drugs dealer. You can't buy it cheaper anywhere else. You get it. You get access to it by giving the only person that has it the one thing he gave you, everything you've got, and your soul besides. Everything you are, consciousness, awareness, a beating heart and breath unending, the whole bag. He knows if you're holding even one penny back, and will hold himself back accordingly. Witness all the dead churches around. See all the dead churches around, and you'll know this is true. I, as a common man, advise all common men to take a look at how and with what I have answered why for myself. The answer I came to and have lived with for some time, years and decades, matter of fact, and see if it's worth the trip for you. First thing was, is, and will always be a person. The first thing always was, is, and will always be. It's self-existent, to say it shorter. And the first thing took that as a name, his only name. Self-existent. Yahweh means self-existent. Why did he make a second thing? Why did he start making things at all? To show off, to show himself, to be known. So he had to make knowers, seers, understanders, things with awareness, to know and see and understand him. Persons. That was the project he outlined for himself. His first project, which boiled down to the creation, making, birthing, bringing forth of a second thing. He, the self-existent, is the first thing, and always shall be. What was the second thing? We have already mentioned the top requirements for this new addition into the scheme of things. A knower, a seer, an understander, something with awareness. The first thing did the second thing and placed in it all that he could. The first thing did the second thing and did it so that if there was only a first and a second thing, all of the first thing's wish and purpose would nevertheless be accomplished. No other things necessary. Yep, he put all his eggs in one basket. For he made a person, not a rock. He made a person with as much in him as is in his, the second thing's, maker. He put everything except the only thing he cannot give anyone nor anything, self-existence. Yes, the self-existent has limitations, and not the common sense limits him. He obeys no one. But it is clearly evident, and common sense bears it out, that if there is only one thing that's always been, that one thing cannot make a thing that's always been. The second thing, therefore, lacks this one attribute. In keeping with the wish to show himself off, to show off, we may certainly note he did his best right at the start. The second thing is the first thing's masterwork. He did this to show he needed no practice. To show everything thereafter, after the second thing, he, the first thing, could pull off his best at the very start of the show. The show is God showing himself. The show is God showing himself off. The show is God showing off. One man's opinion. One common man. Till next time.